Good afternoon, Philadelphia. I'm Daniel Gallen from PennLive here with Aaron Kasinitz.
Hey.
And we're here to chat about the NFL draft. The Philadelphia Eagles selected Tennessee defensive end Derek Barnett at number 14 last night. And then they have two more picks today, number 43, number 99. Plenty needs to fill for the Eagles, so we're going to talk about those. Aaron, what do you think about the Barnett pick?
Yeah, I think, obviously Derek Barnett's a really, really interesting guy. He's got some numbers to him, right?
Yeah.
He broke Reggie White's sack record at Tennessee. He broke the SEC freshman sack record. He had 33 sacks in 3 years, and when you're talking about SEC caliber offensive tackles he was going against, that's pretty impressive. So he's a guy who has some credentials, and he fills a need. The Eagles lacked a little bit of a explosion with their pass rush last year, and all three of their top defensive ends, if we're thinking Chris Long, Vinny Curry, and Brandon Graham, they're all 28 or older, going to be 29 by the end of the year. So got a young guy, rush passer, filled a need. Question is this a dominant player? Is Derek Barnett going to be a dominant player? His combine measurables weren't great. His speed isn't amazing. But he produced in college. He fills a need, so it's hard to be too upset about the pick for sure.
When you get into he's one of those guys when you get into the NFL draft and you're trying to weigh the college production against, what scouts see, what the measurables are. And he's a guy that was super, super productive.
Right.
NFL Network put up the graphic comparing his stats to Myles Garrett's stats in SEC play.
Right, and they're better, yeah.
But then Garrett tested out of this world at the combine, and he's going to make a lot of money as the number one pick.
Right, and that's kind of the thing. The Seahawks a couple of years ago, when they put together those championship Seahawks teams, what they did was they put a premium on really good athletes. And I think that kind of spread around the NFL, where it's like, you got to be, if you're going to be a pass rusher, if you're going to be a safety, if you're going to be a cornerback, you have to test well measurables-wise. You got to run a fast 40, you got to have a great, broad jump, you got to be explosive, got to do well in the cone drills because you're explosive. Barnett maybe isn't necessarily that guy, but he fits the mold of a Joe Douglas, the new vice president of players personnel, who was hired last May. This is his first draft, really in charge. He's a guy, came up with the Ravens with Ozzie Newsome, and his whole thought was, we're going to build guys, character guys who are tough and productive. And that's more of what Derek Barnett was than a great athlete like Myles Garrett. So it'll be interesting to see.
So defensive end, or entering the draft, defensive end was a need, but it wasn't really considered to be one of the glaring needs.
Right.
When you look at offensive playmakers and then guys in the secondary. Mm-hmm. So I think we can expect at number 43 today to see the Eagles address one of those needs. Just right off the bat, what's kind of the first name or first position group that comes to mind that you think we'll see at number 43?
I really think running back and cornerback are the two things that you can label as pure needs. I think defensive end was up there, but those are the two where you need some help there. And cornerback's the one where if they could, I think in a perfect world, the Eagles probably would have liked a cornerback in the first round even, a guy who could play right away. They didn't get that, but there's still some options in day two. So cornerback, there's guys, Washington's Kevin King, very talented player. Quincy Wilson from Florida is a guy who could be a second-round player who might be able to play right away. A few other guys like that who I think we could see at that second-round spot, and then maybe late in the third round, there's still a few talented corners around who we could see as well.
Kevin King is really intriguing to me, especially with his size.
Right.
I think 6'3", 200 pounds. He can be physical, play press coverage.
Big corner.
It seems like he can really handle himself.
Yeah, and Jim Schwartz is a guy who, he's not, Chip Kelly kind of had, you need a certain size of a cornerback, like trying to take cornerbacks under 6 foot or whatever. Jim Schwartz isn't like that. He just wants competitive guys, but I think King kind of fits both of those spots. You got Quincy Wilson, who was kind of known as a really super competitive guy as well. And I think you got Tease Tabor at Florida, who he's probably slipping into the third round because he didn't test well at the combine. But again, a guy who's got a lot of confidence, who played with a little bit of an edge, which is what Jim Schwartz likes. So we'll see. Any of those guys can go both in the second round. It's been an unpredictable draft already. Mm-hmm. The guys who they might want in the second round but have to pass up on could also be available late in the third. And a good point to make is the Eagles have 2 fourth-round picks and a couple veteran players who they've made sure to let people know are disposable. So it's quite possible that they trade up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, with the cornerbacks, it seems like to me Kevin King, Quincy Wilson are along the lines of the second round type talents, and then when we get into the third round, that's where a guy like Tease Tabor could come off the board, and even San Diego State's DeMonte Casey, talking to Ike Taylor, the former Steelers cornerback earlier this week, he really liked him as a smaller third round guy that just makes plays. Ike Taylor compared him to Asante Samuel as someone who was a little undersized but still made plays, and he really seems like someone that could be there at number 3 or in the third round.
Yeah, no doubt, and I think there's just a lot of options with cornerback. So we'll see. But I think moving forward to the next position, I think running back's the other thing that we've talked about, where if they can get a guy who can start right away at running back, they would look into that. And in round 2, there's some intriguing options. Dalvin Cook is a guy who a lot of people thought would be a first-round pick. I mean, the Eagles were targeting him in the first round. He hasn't gone yet. Joe Mixon, who obviously has some off-the-field issues after settling a case where he punched a woman in the face, and that was on video. So that's an interesting case, but very explosive running back. And then Alvin Kamara, who at Tennessee is very good. So do you have a guy who you like out of that? Do you think one fits with the Eagles?
I think they have to go. If Cook is there, I think you have to take him. I don't, he's one of the best running backs in the country over the past few years. He's shown that he can run away from people. He can just kind of do it all. And so I think if he's there, you have to take him. But if he's gone and Alvin Kamara is there, I think that he would be another really good option because he has the skill set where he can catch passes out of the backfield. He can run. And when you talk about this came up when talking about Christian McCaffrey, it's kind of the wear and tear that guys have. I mean, Alvin Kamara barely has any from his time at Tennessee because he was playing with Jalen Hurd, and he just wasn't utilized that much, but he tested really well. So he's a guy that I feel like would be like a pretty good sleeper, kind of a sleeper pick. I've read comparisons of him to Joe Mixon in terms of kind of like a less advanced Joe Mixon in terms of ball skills. So I think that Kamara would be a really good find there if he's there. Yeah,
it's interesting if we're taking Joe Mixon out of the equation, which we don't know, but if we're looking at Kamara versus Cook, it's really two totally different worlds where Kamara tested decently well. Scouts have really liked him, but he wasn't super productive in college, I think. I mean, he had some really good games, but I think the stats, like he'd never had more than 20 carries in a game or something like that. Whereas Dalvin Cook, like we all know, he's been this amazing running back at Florida State the last couple of years. So, where do you go? Do you look at the guy who was 100% a star in college, or the guy who maybe still needs to prove himself a little bit? My guess is Cook probably would go over Kamara if they decide to go running back there. But I mean, the Eagles, in the history, not only with the Eagles, but of the league, but also the history of the Eagles, the history of their top leaders, their top executives, they're not going to take a running back in the second round unless they really believe in him.
For sure. But I think the one thing that remains over all of it is the fact that that the Eagles need to get offensive playmakers. And so whether that's Cook or Kamara in the second round, there's a couple other guys available, like Curtis Samuel out of Ohio State. He's a guy that played the H-back for Urban Meyer, but Urban Meyer's H-back is more of a wide receiver running back hybrid. And, he ran the ball. He was a deep threat for them. And at times last year, he was really kind of their only offense. So I think he's a guy you said visited, and, he could be an intriguing fit there, as well as Juju Smith-Schuster, if the Eagles want to go with another wide receiver from USC.
Smith-Schuster is probably more of a clear-cut wide receiver, a guy who's going to be out there. And there are several other wide receivers who they could consider here in the second or third round. Samuel's a really interesting guy. That H-back role is Percy Harvin played it when Urban Meyer was in Florida. Braxton Miller kind of, made it sort of famous because he was a quarterback going to play it. But, a guy who would come in motion and take jet sweeps, and a guy who would catch bubble screens and stuff like that. So I think if you get a guy like Curtis Samuel, that's intriguing to the offense, but I don't necessarily know if he's a great fit with the other needs the Eagles have, especially because they've got some talent at receiver now. I think they need to solidify a few spots on defense, like cornerback. I think running back's big, and I think Samuel's a guy who might fit better with the team that's one piece away, that needs one dynamic piece, and I don't know if the Eagles are that team.
another kind of sleeper type pick that I had that could potentially go off the board and doesn't really seem that likely. If Cam Robinson, for whatever reason, is there at number 43, I feel like that could pique the interest a little bit. Offensive line isn't really a glaring need for the Eagles, but it's kind of a sneaky one where they're going to need to replace Jason Peters at some point soon.
Right, and if you're going best player available and you got a guy like that who a lot of people thought might even be a top 10, top 15 type of pick, why not at least consider it, and then you could maybe sit him until Jason Peters leaves, maybe he challenges for a spot somewhere. So, yeah, no, I mean, I think the thing is you need really good players in the draft, especially in the second and third round. I think that's where you just got to get some good players, and if they think Cam Robinson's that good, they'll go get him regardless of need.
Mm-hmm. And finally, I think one of the more intriguing and interesting fits who in the secondary, who might actually be the best cornerback in the draft, is Sidney Jones, who tore his Achilles during his pro day at Washington. And he's a guy that people, I think, in the initial mocks had going to the Eagles at number 14. The injury, of course, causes him to fall. And so, it's kind of up in the air about what's going to happen with him.
Yeah, no doubt. I think if you're a team like the Eagles who need quarterback help, you have to compartmentalize it, where you say, okay, obviously Sidney Jones is this good or he was that good. But the two things the injury you have to consider with the injury is, one, he's not going to help you that much. 2017, right? But the other thing is, what is this injury going to do long term? A ruptured Achilles is not a joke. I mean, it's a serious injury that could have a long-term effect. And does it signal that maybe he's injury prone? So their doctors really need to get in there and do a good job of figuring out what the deal is with Sidney Jones. Because to me, if you don't think this injury is going to affect him, if you think he can get back to being the player that he was going to be, and if you think that it's not a sign that he's injury prone, then even at 43, I think he's definitely worth it because, yes, the Eagles could use help right away at cornerback, but, I mean, are they winning a Super Bowl next year? I'm sure a lot of fans hope so. But if you're looking in the future, if you're not looking for short-term solutions, you're looking for long-term solutions, why not get a guy who sits a year and then becomes a first-round talent?
Yeah, I saw someone talking about Jones on Twitter, and the one thing that they kind of put out there was that torn Achilles, torn ACL, any of these kind of, severe injuries that in the past might have been death knells. In 2017, there's plenty of guys that have come back. I mean, there's always guys that don't, but there's plenty that are, and especially that Sidney Jones is young, which always helps. He's not suffering this injury at age 28.
Right.
So he's a guy that can come in there. But I think it really does kind of come down to what you meant. Is that is it short term? Is it long term? Because if Jones isn't necessarily ready until even week 6 or week 7, you're still going into the season with not that much back there in the secondary.
Exactly. And I mean that's the thing and it was a tough first round because Jones and Gary and Conley were probably the two guys who would fit at number 14. They're the two corners who would have made sense. But Jones has the injury. Conley had a rape accusation that likely hurt his draft stock. He ended up going in the first round, 24th overall with the Raiders. But, you had those two guys. So those were the ones who seemed like they were the right fits at 14. They were gone. They decided not to reach for Humphrey. So they need cornerbacks. That's pretty clear. I think everybody would agree they need cornerbacks, but how badly do they need quarterbacks and how quickly do they need quarterbacks? And those answers will dictate how today plays out.
No, there's plenty of directions they could go. To wrap up, if you, at 43, any of these players are available, you're the Eagles, who would you pick?
I like Kevin King a lot. I think he's an intriguing prospect, and I think the idea of solidifying cornerbacks is such an important position in the NFC East right now. So Kevin King, and if you're really sold on Sidney Jones as well, the two Washington corners. What about you?
I think it's a coin flip between King and Jones, but I think that the fact that the Eagles need someone that can be on the field week 1, out on the perimeter in the secondary, I think leans it towards King.
Right, and we'll see if they're available, and there's 10, 11 teams to pick, and like I said, the Eagles have a little bit of ammo. If they want to trade up, they could trade back and recoup another pick, so should be an interesting day.
Yeah, I'll be back over at the Art Museum on the Rocky Steps for rounds 2 and 3 of the NFL Draft. Aaron will be in South Philly at the Eagles facility. You can follow me on Twitter at DanielJTGallen.
I'm at Aaron Cash Reports. Be covering the stuff from the Eagles practice facility. Yeah.
Thanks for tuning in, and be sure to check PennLive.com/sports for more of your NFL Draft coverage.